Until recently, YouTube was the main platform to be a creator. Social media is not a community building tool anymore. You need to own your users. You should not be talking about the sell. Then your reach can drop massively. That's where most communities go wrong. Every entrepreneur will be a creator as well. I don't think the monetization problem is solved for creators, actually. Hi everyone, good afternoon. Really happy to be here. As we discussed, my name's Alex. I'm COO of NAS Company. I've got a lot to talk about today in this workshop. We're going to keep it very interactive. I'm going to tell you a lot about content creation, the future of content creation. I'm going to talk about community building and what the challenges are and how you can think about community building as entrepreneurs, which I know all of you are focused on building businesses. Before I do that though, I like to know who is in the room, okay? So I know that all of you are thinking about building businesses and you're looking at products for drop shipping, I understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask someone to raise your hand if you want to introduce yourself. Stand up, you say who you are, where you're from, and what product you're focused on. So who would like to go first? Okay.
Yeah.
Stand up.
Hello, I'm Gopal. I'm from Korea. We're bringing back retro game consoles, like games like Contra and Mario. Those consoles, wireless consoles. Yeah.
Very interesting. And the reason why I'm going to ask you, I'm going to tell you, I bet that every single product that you mention can build a community and can create content. So I want to hear. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Cherishma and I'm from Bangalore, and coming to the product that we are currently building on is scented candles.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today, all right? I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background because I think it's really important when you think about building a business to also hear a little bit about how people get there, right? The second thing is I'm going to break down community building and content creation into 1.0 and 2.0. So a lot of what you may know, I know some of you are creators, a lot of what you may know about content creation, I will bet will be in 1.0. What the conventional wisdom is about creating content and community building. And then I want to tell you about where the world is going and what's actually happening now and what I think will happen in the next 5 years and what every brand should be doing right now in the community building 2.0 era. Okay? So first of all, who am I? You heard a little bit of an intro from my LinkedIn, but let me tell you actually who I am as a person and as a business builder. So I grew up in the UK. I'm originally from London. Like many people, I did my degree. I was doing economics and political science. And I was like, I want to get into the world of building businesses, but I started off not having that much confidence, right, around building a business. I was like, I need to go through my professional training. I need to do that kind of route. So I started as a management consultant, and I was in the UK. And you know, like the UK is a great country as well. You know, it's got a lot of interesting businesses, but it also has a lot of institutions that have been established for like 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. So as someone who's like really interested in entrepreneurship, I felt very frustrated. I was like, every time I want to do something, I am met with resistance of 100 years of financial institutions and 100 years of different like products in FMCG and all sorts of places. And so I was like, you know, what I'm interested in is launching new markets, launching new products. And so I was like, I want to go somewhere where I can provide value, but also where there's a problem with a social reason behind it as well. And so that drew me to Southeast Asia. So I kind of packed my bags, went over to Singapore, and I started looking at problems in Southeast Asia. And you know, one of the biggest problems in Southeast Asia was actually getting around. I know, you know, probably in the early days before ride sharing in India as well, this was a common problem. But I was like, I can make a contribution there. And this was my first interaction actually with community building. Because when I went to work at Uber, they were thinking about community building. They were thinking about, okay, I have drivers, right? I have passengers. When I have drivers and I want to do things, I need to organize them and build relationships and nurture and provide value so that I build trust. And the same went through for passengers. So that was my first experience as an operator building communities. And then Grab, which is essentially like the Ola of Southeast Asia, they were like, we want to build a new vertical. And they said, okay, Alex, come work for us. There was a merger between Uber and Grab. And they said, go and turn up in Vietnam and build this food delivery business. Just to be clear, I'd been to Vietnam, but I do not speak Vietnamese. I never built a business in Vietnam. There was no historic food delivery in Vietnam. And I was like, what the hell do I do? Okay. And this was like a very like pivotal lesson for entrepreneurship for me, which was like, people's, like how you use people's skills and relationships to make things happen. If I can't speak to a business to convert them because I don't speak Vietnamese, how do I build that community of people around me who I can mobilize with the strategy and the ideas to make things happen? So I went to Grab. We built a massive business. By the time I left, we went from 10 transactions a day to more than 1 million transactions a day. I was operating in 2 countries, more than 100 cities, and 800 people worked for me. It was going great, making, had shares, making money, etc. But I was not satisfied. And the reason why was because, as a company gets bigger, the ability to build and to influence becomes in some ways smaller, which is really ironic, right? You think as you become a bigger company, you have more influence, right? But a lot of the time it's around, especially when you're an operator, it's around processes, it's around internal alignment, it's around investors. And I still had the itch to build. So that is how I end up at NAS Company. I met Nusar, the founder of NASdaily, in Singapore. And he told me a little bit about the idea of where the future was going for content creators. And in the past, it was all about an individual with an editor and maybe a designer building a channel. And he was like, content creators are going to start building businesses. This is 3 years ago. And I entered into the creator economy. So that's sort of when I entered into NAS.io, NAS Academy, and started building communities. And I spent a lot of time with some of the world's biggest creators. This is Mr. Beast in LA, and I've spent time with some of the biggest creators in India as well. And one of the things that I realized when I spoke to them is, as well as being great at creating content, they were also very strong at building communities. This was the common trait. They would interact with them in many different ways, but they created that sense of loyalty and engagement. And when I looked at NASdaily as well, I also saw that actually, if any of you guys follow NASdaily as a channel, you would have seen that even 7 years ago, a lot of it was about community building. So one of the things that we used to do is we used to host in-person meetups. Let's just say we showed up in Delhi. We'd post on Facebook, say, we are hosting a meetup in the park. Anyone can come. So on the one hand, that was a great opportunity to engage with our audiences, but there was a secret agenda, which was that we knew that the best stories, the best videos for our product would come from the people who went to the meetup. So we asked 2 questions. Question number 1, what are the stereotypes that people say about your city or your country that you really dislike? And people would share. And the second thing we would ask is, what are the stories or people in your community, in your city, that should get a platform, but never get it? No one ever talks about them. And those are the ideas that created the videos. So this was like how we started communities. We built all our communities, this was 7 years ago, on WhatsApp. And one of the things that was amazing is even 6, 7 years later, a lot of those communities are around today, right? So in that era, whether it's Mr. Beast, NASdaily, any creator that you meet, right? This is what I would describe as the community building 1.0 era. I've listed down some of the things that are common in the community building 1.0 era. YouTube. Until recently, YouTube was the main platform to be a creator. Long-form content, what does that mean? 10 to 15-minute videos. In 10 to 15-minute videos, you're able to build a relationship. You have that opportunity to put in that casual coffee, or sitting down musing about life, or the long-form vlogs, right, where you're traveling around, and you really get to know the character, okay? The second thing, the comment section, all right? The opportunity to engage within the video. When someone spends a lot of time on a platform like YouTube, that can be your community. The third one is emails, email newsletters, email marketing, emails like creating a relationship through long-form written content. And the fourth that many of you probably were members of were Facebook groups, right? And that became a really strong community platform. Now, I said 2015 to 2021 because something happened in 2020 that was not the pandemic that really started to change things when it came to community building, right? Actually, before I go into that, I was going to mention brands because a lot of you are entrepreneurs. Brands and startups are part of that era. Because if you were a brand in, let's say, the 2015 to 2021 era, one of the most effective ways you could grow your audience, right, was if the founder or the CMO or the COO would create content. For those of you on Twitter, you'll see this all the time, right? And I use this example because it's a very powerful comparison, which is that if you ask the average person, who is the founder and CEO of Tesla, they will tell you very quickly that it's Elon Musk. But if you ask them, who is the CEO and founder of Ford, but who is the CEO today of Ford, very few people will know. And that is the power of when an individual entrepreneur creates content. Okay, then let me go into the problem. I started going into that into a second, right? The problem in 2020, 2021 was this app, TikTok. TikTok changed content. Okay, I know TikTok is no longer in India, but it's still in India as well, changed content, right? When TikTok came along, they introduced the concept of the short form content, right? Actually, as NASdaily, we were creating 1-minute videos on Facebook, but that was not the convention. That was not actually the way that you build a community and made money. But TikTok came around and they created this whole new category. And they started saying, this is the way that you can grow. And most interestingly, in the short form era, these 3 things became critical. Number 1, content needs to be 1 minute or less. People's attention span is short. The second thing is that discovery in the past was all about who you follow. I discover this person, I follow them, and then every time I follow them, I get their content. But TikTok said, no, that's not actually the best way because you don't know what kind of content you like. Actually, your behavior tells you what content you like. So as we measure your behavior, the algorithm is better at discovering content for you than who you follow. And the third thing that they said was, with short form content, it's not about the thumbnail. It's not about the title of the video, right? It's about the first 3 seconds. It's about grabbing people's attention. So the rules of the game were changed by TikTok. And the other platforms followed, right? We have YouTube Shorts that didn't exist before. We have Instagram Reels that didn't exist before, okay? So this sounds great. A new category of content's emerged. Why did this change the game for community building? Well, the first thing is, with algorithm-based discovery, if followers don't matter anymore, then your reach can drop massively. Because one video, you can have 100,000 views, and the next video can have 10,000 views. And right, that's a huge problem because your audience is not stuck on who they follow, they're not stuck on search, they're stuck on the home feed, right? If you're on Reels, for example, you're just scrolling through to see the next video, the next video. So you're not really thinking about, I want to see Alex's content, or I want to see Tanmay's content, or Mr. Beast's content. So then as a result, less than 10% of your followers will see your content. Well, how do you build a community if your followers don't see your content regularly? So you start losing control. And that is the era of the start of the 2.0 era. Every traditional mechanism to build a community through YouTube, Facebook groups, etc., becomes less relevant. I mean, probably, I don't know, but how many of you here still check Facebook groups regularly? Anyone? Probably not, right? You're probably using Instagram, you're probably using YouTube, Twitter, maybe Threads now. Okay, so Community 1.0 has a problem. What happened? Well, there's a fundamental shift now. Social media is not a community building tool anymore. Social media, I like to describe, is your billboard. It's a great place to get discovered, but it is not a great place to build relationships. So if social media is your billboard, then what is community building? Well, maybe it's email, right? How do I reach people? So in the past, we said long form content, Facebook groups, we mentioned email, right? So is email maybe still a solution? Start an email list. Okay, the good things, no algorithm. But the big problem, if you're in India, or where I live in Singapore, email open rates are dropping. And I use this example, this is really powerful. If you think about your business and you think about collecting emails, this is what's going to happen, just so you know. Let's say you have 100,000 followers. Let's say 10% of people sign up to your email list. Then think about your open rates. Let's say on a good day, 20% of people open your emails. And then your click-through rate is 1 or 2%, right? That means for every 100,000 followers you have, around 40 people will ever click on your content. That is not a community, just to let you know, okay? So in places like India, in places like Singapore, in the places that we operate as NAS, email is just ineffective. Now, I'm not saying don't collect emails, right? Emails can play a role. But if you rely only on emails, you cannot build a community today. So what are the alternatives? What do we do? Okay? So just to recap, as you probably know, community building is all about relationships, okay? So you need to reach people regularly. So I put here, you need to access the most people, you need high open rates, and you need no algorithm, all right? So these are 3 things that we define as reaching people regularly. So there are many options to do that. I just listed a few of the platforms here. Discord, Slack, Telegram, WhatsApp, maybe Facebook Messenger, okay? But we found that actually we think there's one that really matters. Okay, and this is what I put here. I put one clear winner. These are the monthly active users across some of the 3 biggest platforms. WhatsApp has 2.3 billion monthly active users. Discord has 150 million. Okay, now, of course, it depends what category your product is in. If you're talking about gaming, for example, you were talking about gaming, right? Maybe Discord is just where your users are at. But the theme is you need to go where your users are. And today, if you're building a community in the 2.0 era, you've got your billboard, which is social media. You need to go where people already are at. And we believe most of the time that's WhatsApp. To be clear, 2.3 billion monthly active users is 30% of the world, not just internet users, but the world, okay? And the average user spends 18 hours a month on WhatsApp. In India, I believe it's 23. It's even more. But if you think about if someone's captive within their WhatsApp chat, you have an opportunity to reach them. And then open rates are very high. So the benefit of chat groups, now forget WhatsApp specifically, but chat groups in general, is that it allows you to own your users. If you have YouTube, right, a YouTube channel, if someone even subscribes to you, you have their YouTube username. You don't have their phone number, right? If they don't go on YouTube, you're in trouble. But with chat groups, you have access to the person no matter where they go. And that's really powerful. So in the Community 2.0 era, beyond your billboard, you need to own your users. So I'm going to try and give you some themes to think about. So I think that LinkedIn's an interesting one because I think that you see people who use, let's say, for example, the messenger part of LinkedIn as a direct way to reach, and you can have groups and interesting discussions. But LinkedIn groups is still very algorithmically driven, and so you don't solve the problem of ownership. So I think LinkedIn most of the time is used for billboard, like social media as your billboard. But I think there's starting to be ways where you can use the chat part as a way without an algorithm. But again, you need to think about how often your users, your target demographic is on there. With your business, you may find that if it's a bunch of founders, for example, using your product, maybe there's something like a LinkedIn chat could be a good way to do that. Okay, so to build a community in the 2.0 era, you need to use a private space. So step 1, billboard. Step 2, private space, own your data. And so this is like the summary so far. This is what we've learned so far. Now, what's next? Okay, I want to introduce you a bit to an approach that we've defined. It's called the NAS approach. And so we found our audience through social media. If you think about NASdaily, I'll use NASdaily as an example so you can understand how we think about it. Nusayr, the founder of NASdaily, found his audience by traveling the world creating content. But then, now we put them into a private space. We have our WhatsApp groups. But the next part of community building, whether you're a brand or a creator, is building a connection. You know, it sounds obvious, but it's not easy. Okay? So how do you create a connection? I want to share a little bit about this. Every community today needs a community strategy. Okay? I want to break down what that means. Okay? What is a community strategy? Why should your community exist? Right? Just because you're a brand and you have a community, I see this all the time. A brand says, hey, I have a Discord. Great, so what? Why, as an individual consumer, do I care? Am I going to learn something in that community? Is it because I meet like-minded users? So for example, if you are a product like a marketplace, or you have something where developers can build within your product, right? A community objective could be that as developers want to learn my product and build within my ecosystem, they want to have access to resources, guides, education, and meet other like-minded developers, right? That is an objective. That's why my community should exist. Without my community, it's very hard. I'll be on my own, okay? Common interest. They're all interested in building in my ecosystem, all right? So defining that before you start is super critical. This is an example of a community that uses our product, NAS.io. They're called the Nickest Hacker Club. Okay, they're based in Delhi, actually. So they use Instagram for their billboard. They then have about 100,000 free members. They come into their community using WhatsApp. So they have lots of different WhatsApp groups. They use NAS.io to like onboard them. And they use lead magnets. So they use like workshops and education as a way to bring people in. That's their objective, to learn. And so this is the kind of thing that they do. So they say, if I want to bring in developers and I want to be education-based, then it's how to become a successful React developer. They would introduction of ChatGPT, earn money for bug bounties. Now, they are a business, by the way. They're creators, but with a business. The point I want to illustrate here is that they are not saying, now buy my product. They've not even talked about their product at this point. Okay, so even as a business or an entrepreneur, the value that you're going to provide, the connection you're going to be providing is not about whether they use your product most of the time. It's going to be about providing them value. Just like social media, community building 2.0 still needs you to provide value before you sell. Okay? Now, the second part is creating a process for connection. Connection is felt. It's not super scientific, but we still believe that there is a process that you can follow. Okay? So, we found that the best, most engaged communities combine a process of learning and doing. Okay? So we put here this kind of process here, which is like learn, practice, feedback, discover, collaborate, insights. But the idea is as you build your community experience, it's not just about putting a bunch of people in a group and letting them chat. When you set up that workshop for them to learn, how are they practicing? So if it's going back to the example of an ecosystem for your brand, for your product, how are they actually going to build? Are you giving them that environment to build? Are you giving them a challenge? Are you giving them a chance to get feedback? Are you giving them an opportunity to discover new things? Are they collaborating with others? And are they getting insights? Okay? This is an interesting example of a company. I didn't want to just give you YouTubers, okay? So my ex company Grab, like actually nothing to do with me. They were like, we want our customers and our drivers and our merchants to be the advocates for our brand. They can tell our story much better. I don't want to use traditional influencers. I want to build a deeper connection with them. So what they did was they said, we're going to bring them into a community on WhatsApp. We're going to teach them how to create content because that's useful for them. They're going to create any content they want, not just about Grab. It's very important. But we're also going to give them ideas of how to do things with Grab. So if they want, because they understood that the pain point for a content creator is ideation. So we're going to help them with ideation. We're going to provide some incentives. And then we're going to give them an opportunity at the end to be hired. Now, there was not an immediate monetary benefit to Grab, but their bet was by providing this value, they would get some of the best of their customers on board, and they would be able to keep them on a 6-month journey, not just a one-off transaction, to do this. And what was amazing was the impact was actually quite big. So 2,000 of their customers said, I want to do this. They picked their best 100. They had videos that actually had millions of views, 14 million in total, of telling the story in a way that Grab would never be able to tell. You know, if Grab said, or Ola said, or Swiggy said, we're wonderful, what are we going to say as consumers? Of course you're going to say that, right? If you tell everyone that your new product is wonderful, they're going to be like, great, I'm not going to engage with this. But if someone says, and one of the stories that went very viral in Malaysia, they said there was this guy who was in a wheelchair. He couldn't get a job, and he couldn't earn a living. But actually, he was able to start delivering food in his area because they had a feature that was, you can actually deliver within, like, say, 1 kilometer. And this guy was able to then make a living for the first time and support his family. And this was an individual who lived in his area, who'd seen what he was doing and started explaining the impact on the local community, on this individual, on their life. The response was incredible, right? Now, if I translate that, of course, that's a great example. I think that's like, you know, a really emotional example. It's really powerful. It's deeply connecting. But my point being is that in your first customers, there can always be stories like this. And going back to that community connection, if you can enhance them to be able to tell that story, it doesn't even have to plug your product. Like, it can just be like obvious that they're using your product underlying it. That powerful connection can be really high. So, the final part of that building a connection and the process for connection, I said here, every orchestra needs a conductor. The word community manager, I think, is vastly misunderstood. In some companies, a community manager is just a person who responds to comments on social media. It's more like, I would say, like customer support. But a community manager is an orchestra conductor because they are tying everything together, if you have a good one. They are the person who says, I have this person who's joined, and this person would get on with this person, I'm going to introduce them. Or I see that this person over here has an opportunity to become a power referrer. So I should get them more involved in the community and give them a bigger stake. Or I think this person has the ability to maybe take on responsibility so they have more ownership in my community. So The person who's the community manager, by the way, in NAS Company, when we run our own communities, often it can be someone quite senior in the company. It doesn't have to be just someone who's like an executor or an operations administrator. It can be someone who's actually really good at creating programming and content. And so when you think about it, it creates fun. Yes, it gives people engagement. Yes, it organizes events. But actually thinking about how it's identifying those high potential people will help your community live on. So, in terms of that connectivity, I just wanted to list some tactics for engagement. Some of these are pretty obvious. Okay, yes, meetups, mentorships, learning we talked about, coaching, even trips, by the way, is becoming a thing. As a brand, you could provide interesting, fun experiences for your community. And community could be your customers, they could be your potential customers, people who you know are in your space. So if you're talking about, I'm just going to use the gaming example, you're talking about, I think, Nintendo, right? Yeah. So it could be that there's a bunch of really fanatic gamers, right? They're not using your product yet, but they're the kind of people that you want associated with your product. You could be giving them tactics for engagement, knowing that in the future, they can be advocates for your brand or maybe use your product. Okay. If you're going to do these things today, my biggest advice, going back to like the chat group and owning your audience, is you don't just need to host an event. Build the community around the event as well. So I'll give you an example here. The Art of Living. So the Art of Living use NAS.io. And what they've said is that they want to do online meditation, but instead of just sending an email or sending a link, they have a WhatsApp group with the daily meditations. And the idea is that they can engage with you on a daily basis. There can be some form of a feedback and response and interaction. They have 25,000 people, actually, no, it's a bit more than 22,000, 25,000 people doing this, all within WhatsApp with NAS.io. So very interesting concept of like, okay, event experience, community building through it. The next one is, and we do this all the time, whenever we host a meetup, I'm hosting meetups now in India while I'm here, the concept of people knowing each other before they turn up. One of the things I used to hate about networking events when I started my career was you show up to an event. Everyone just sits down to listen to a speaker. You don't meet anyone. Then at the end, you have like an hour, and you have 100 people. So you end up meeting, let's say, 10% of the room. You don't know if it's the right 10%. You don't know anything about them. And it's kind of a bit potluck. And then you leave. And you have no information about them. It's very hard to reach out to them again. So we introduced this thing where whenever we do an event, we open a WhatsApp group with the event, and we get everyone to introduce themselves. We say, put a photo of you or a video. Say who you are, what you do with your LinkedIn. So imagine before you've even got to, this is me, before you even got to the event, you know everyone who's going to be there. You actually think, okay, this is the people I want to meet. This is what they look like, by the way, which is a big problem as well. I may be able to message them before, be like, hey, I'm going to give a heads up. And then you're in the room and you're like, I'm super familiar. That creates connection. And then afterwards, what I do actually personally when I do my events is I create a Google Sheet with all the LinkedIns. I put it in NAS.io and I give it to them and say, hey, if you didn't meet anyone, just connect with everyone on LinkedIn. Still maintain the privacy, but give them opportunity. So this is community building around events, right? This is so important to establish that connection. And then the final thing that we do as NASdaily is we do offline experiences. So we do something now called NAS Summit. And we say for all the people who've interacted online, for us it's community builders, it's creators. We say, okay, you've met online, you've maybe done some events. Now we're going to host a physical experience, like for example here. And we're going to bring all these people together, and they're going to form an even deeper connection as well. So think about it. 1.0 was just create content on YouTube. 2.0 is all of these different things, okay? And then finally, you can even use AI for connections as well. I know you guys maybe exploring AI for your products, but we actually introduced last week something called Ruby AI. And we said one of the biggest problems when you're in a community, like a WhatsApp group, is that there's like hundreds of messages. You'll probably, if you're a member of many groups, hundreds of messages, information gets lost, maybe something valuable happened and you missed it. So we created an AI, basically a summary tool. So every day, all the chats in your group get summarized into a concise message with all the takeaways, the action items, the resources, and it gets sent to the community manager. It's like this, it's like a summary, and then they can share it with the community. So this is an example how we're using AI, but helping community managers to foster deeper connections. Okay, so again, the 2.0 era, find people on short form, bring them into a private space, build deep connections. Okay? Only then, but have you noticed I've not used the word making money once yet? Apologies for the formatting, I think it was PowerPoint. Only then can you think about monetization. So if you're a business, this is so important. I cannot emphasize this enough. When you build that community, and you're building the people who are coming in, you're building the ways to grow your community, you're building the deep connections, you should not be talking about the sell. That's where most communities go wrong. Once the connection's established, you've primed your audience, the audience trusts you, they know what you're talking about, they believe in what you're doing, then the sell becomes very easy. Because the authenticity is there, they know you've been doing it to build the relationships, you've been helping them, and that's when the product can be sold. So the good news is that, this is not something hypothetical. People are already doing this, right? And that's why we built NAS.io, just so you know. So the idea is that if you want to bring people into your space, you need a way, if you just send them a chat.whatsapp.com/89745L2, whatever the link is, it's not very easy to acquire them. So we built things like create a landing page for WhatsApp, bring them in, have engagement analytics, host events and courses all in one place, and then things like AI summary. So we are saying that's how you do it, and that's how content creators and businesses are using it. But what does this mean for you? So this is a kind of rough chart of the way that the internet's been using communities. Okay, 1994, email, forums, Reddit, Facebook groups. But we see the future is in this space, and it will change. It's not going to be places like WhatsApp and Discord and Telegram forever. But for the next 3, 4, 5 years, if you're using these products, you'll see the features they are building, and time again, are for brands and individuals to do these things. So it's a recognition that all these founders realize that the community platforms are here, and it's going to take over, I think, how brands use it. So we think in the next 5 years, when you think about your marketing channels, you think about, okay, paid marketing, like Facebook ads. You'll think about different growth tactics. You will think about having a community as well. Now, as a brand, as a founder, you could do it in different ways. You can build your own, but also you may find, let's say you're building a product for marketers. You may find in Delhi there's a fantastic community of CMOs. Your other way is you can partner with them, right? And you can say, you build the community, we'll be your official partner, we'll sponsor the community, or maybe we'll even acquire the community. I've seen M&A around communities between brands happen already. But in the next 5 years, every brand will have a relationship or have their own community. And they'll be building those regular relationships and deep connections. And what will happen is social media will help you find your audience, but platforms like WhatsApp will help you keep it. So I know that, for example, at Masters Union, we talk a lot about creators, right, and creating content, and there's been guest speakers. We believe at NASdaily and NAS Company, content is so important. Every entrepreneur will be a creator as well. But that will just be the billboard, okay? The community will be where the relationships happen. So if you want to have some community building tips, you can scan this QR code. We've got a free course as well on how to build communities, so you can use that free of charge. NAS.io/WhatsApp tips. But otherwise, I think I would say that there's no better opportunity to start now. So just to say that, a lot of people ask me, do I build a massive audience first and then build a community? Do I build a large business first and then build a community? My advice is do them both together. You will learn much faster, and being close to the potential customer or the audience is only a good thing, as you already probably know, okay? So I'd say there's no better time to start than now. And what I'm going to do, actually, is I would love to have Q&A, but I'm also going to save some time where we're going to invite some people, I think, who've prepared a pitch of their community. And I'm going to do something called a roast, which is to give them live feedback on whether I think it's a good idea or not good idea. And my goal is that you can understand a bit more about the things I've discussed, about what makes a good community and what doesn't. So yeah, that's some of the things I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for listening, and I would love to take any questions and be able to answer them for you.
My name is Sayyam Malik. So my question is, how do you navigate different, while building a community, I think creating here, but creating an international community, so how do you navigate different cultures to create that?
So if you're like a brand, is that an example, and you want to create an international community?
Yeah.
Very good question. So I think that communities can be divided in different ways. So they can be divided by location. People in Delhi who really care about dropshipping. Okay, maybe that's a community. But the other part is maybe you live in a town or a village or a country where there aren't that many people interested in your area. So let's just say that I live in a specific town in England, and I'm really passionate about dropshipping, but no one else in my village or town cares about it. Then geography is not going to be very effective. So then, if I care about dropshipping, and there's someone in Delhi who cares about dropshipping, even though our cultures may be different, I'm going to have way more in common with them than I am with my person in my village in the UK. And so I think that interest-based communities can define, can go beyond boundaries. And actually, there's a guy called Balaji who talks about the network state and about how the future of the internet is going to be a lot more organized around interests than it is around nationality, which I think is a really interesting idea. So I don't think you need to be constrained by city or country. The question will be with a brand is my product available in this country? So if I'm building a community for my brand, yes, not everyone needs to be a customer, for sure. But I like to think that you're attacking the addressable market, your TAM. So it would be a shame if you started something in a locality that can never use your product. So that's what my advice would be. So I would say, internationally, focus on interest. Of course, language helps if it's similar language. But try and focus it on the countries that can use your product.
Hi, I'm Kriti. I wanted to ask that sometimes when we start out our own businesses, the first thing we do is, okay, whatever is the age group, you go on the platform that most of them are on. Yeah. So for me, I started off on Instagram. And what I've noticed is that the communication is fairly one-sided. And transitioning everyone over to WhatsApp, where you actually retain them, but there isn't too much of a value add to give to them, which isn't already happening on Instagram. This is a very confusing space to be in. So what would your
Great question.
thoughts be on navigating?
So what do you do on your Instagram channel? What kind of things do you provide to that target market?
Investment advice, because it started off as kind of like marketing for my investment advisory business.
Fantastic. Okay. So the truth is that when it comes to content, there are all different types of content, right? So on Instagram, the most effective sort of method or mode of content is Reels today. So Reels do really well compared with stories or posts in terms of attracting a new audience. So on the one hand, if you're doing investment advice, creating Reels about education around different ways you can think about investing or potential stock tips or others can be one way. But there are many other types of content mediums you can use. So there can be short form written tips. There can be voice notes about specific things that you see. There can be newsletters. And what we've seen actually in the investment advice space is people on Instagram who are creating general advice saying, okay, come into my WhatsApp group and I'll give you specific stock tips every week, for example. So there's a differentiation between the content that provides a lot of reach, which may be more broad, and the content where you go deep. So a specific stock tip is quite specific. Maybe that's better for a WhatsApp channel. But actually, talking about ways you can think about starting to invest may be more an Instagram approach. But the main difference is they're not trying to do the same content in both places. Because as you said, it may be a little bit redundant. So I think for you, the question will be, let's say you started a broadcast channel on Instagram. The biggest problem I have, so I think broadcasts on Instagram are great in the respect that you have a direct connection. But again, the problem with that is I don't own my audience. I don't know who they are. I know their Instagram name, but I don't have their phone number. I don't have their email. I don't know what their interests are. I can't, if Instagram stops working, or I know people whose accounts have been banned, then you've lost them. I don't know if you've noticed, but my inbox is also getting for some reason, the discovery on Instagram inbox is not as effective for me as my WhatsApp. And it's probably due to how much time I spend checking my Instagram inbox versus my WhatsApp. Now that will depend on your sector and your geography. So I think if you can differentiate those two, keep doing Instagram to find them. But make sure the content's differentiated. And I would say the other thing to think about with WhatsApp and Telegram is that you have different types of groups. So you have an announcement group. Announcement group's more almost like an email, right? It's one-to-many. Then you have a chat group, which is many-to-many. You have DM, which is one-to-one. They're introducing channels, which is going to be a bigger group. So if you're hey, I don't want to go one-to-one in WhatsApp, it's too much work, you could just have an announcement channel and start there. So that's how I would think about it. But it sounds like, there is some like space to differentiate. Hope that helps. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. So I'll share a case about my previous company.
Sure.
So I was sort of working on a music community, right? So
Nice.
we were trying to build the music community. We initially started off, the company was at seed stage. So we started off building the community on WhatsApp. Exactly, we also did the seeding as well. Our own team members pretending they're users as well and trying to push the initial conversation. But as soon as this company reached Series A, right, they wanted to launch their own product.
Okay.
Right, and own their own app. So they wanted to bring these users to in-app chats. So how that transition would you suggest that keep the community completely on WhatsApp, or how can we make the transition from WhatsApp to in-app chats? So
Okay, how many of you go to, let's say, apps where they have maybe one product, one chat group that you're not on every day and like interact with them? Like put your hand up if you do it regularly. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say maybe 5 out of how many people are here? Maybe 60, 70. So let's just say like maybe optimistically 10% of the room. That is your risk. Your risk is that 90% will not go there. And we've seen this with some of the most popular content creators. They get really excited because they have a really engaged community on WhatsApp and they say, you know what? Why should I use WhatsApp? Because it's, there are limitations and frustrations with platforms like WhatsApp. You can't customize it with your own brand. There's a lot of limitations around what you can do within it. So they're like, let's build my own. Now, in some cases, it may work. But there are many cases where the engagement will just drop. Now, if you're a business, engagement is all that matters. Because ultimately, you want them to buy your product. So for the benefit of a little bit more branding, for the benefit of maybe a little bit more control, I think you risk losing your audience. And so that's what I think, every brand is different. And there may be a situation, I see brands who successfully do it. But I would say the majority could invest that same engineering resource, that same amount of money on software into other parts of your business. So that's why with NAS.io, what we said was, we're not going to build our own chat. We're going to work with the existing platforms, integrate with them, and we're going to give you everything else you need. Audience management, CRM, analytics, capturing more data on your users. Because that's what makes WhatsApp and Discord and Telegram better. But we don't need to compete with getting 2.3 billion active users at this point, which we know, like how many platforms have successfully done that? It's not many. So that's how I think. So I think it sounds like in that case it was a struggle, right? What did they do in the end?
we lost our customer base there.
You see, that's the challenge. So that would be my advice, especially if you're in startup mode. Every dollar, I didn't think I mentioned, but we've raised VC money. So we've raised $23 million. We backed by Lightspeed in India, Southeast Asia, and a bunch of other like top VCs. And we also thinking about like in this world today, if you raise money, you need to be capital efficient because the market is tough, right? So you need to be selective on what you build. So if you're a community-first gaming company, maybe it's worth it. But maybe instead you should be using streaming platforms like Twitch. So that's, I think, how you should think about it. I hope that helps. We'll take 1 or 2 more questions, and then we can go into we'll take one here, and then we'll go over here.
So my question is so there are creators and then there are creator enablers, the companies who enable creators and help them out. So they have already solved for like maximizing the reach for the creator and monetization problems. So what do you think is the next thing which creators are looking that is solved for them? What is that white space which these creator enablers can solve for? So yeah, that's my question.
Fantastic. So great question. I think that the monetization, if you talk to creators, if some of you are creators, you may agree or disagree. Please speak up if you disagree. I don't think the monetization problem is solved for creators, actually. I think that there are products out there that are doing a great service to help creators. I think in the US, Patreon changed the game for many. It allowed them to start charging their audience directly. Course platforms, in the US it's Kajabi, but you have also course platforms in India, have helped creators make money. But if you talk to the average like middle-class creator, they'll still say, I need to do other work because I cannot do this full time. So I think that the creator today, so I think in the creator maybe 4 or 5 years ago would say, I create YouTube content and I create a course maybe. I think the creator today will have a suite of products. Maybe they'll have a course. Maybe they'll run a series of events. Maybe they'll do advisory work, coaching, and others. They'll have 5 or 10 products, depending on their space. Now, what is untapped potential? This is like where I see some interest. So, I think in travel, huge untapped potential. If someone is creating great content and having a lot of fun traveling and knows all these great places, if I want to go traveling, wouldn't I want to go with them? So the concept of creators organizing travel is really interesting. And I think we're starting to see some innovations in the US on this, but I think that's a very big untapped market. I think in commerce, TikTok, for example, in Indonesia has done a lot on creator commerce, which is like very innovative. I still think we're at like day 1 on creator commerce. But I think that ultimately, for every niche of creator, there is a suite of products that needs to be created. So I think music has been a big theme, right? I think we've seen a lot of innovation around music creators and products that they can do to monetize. But I think if you take any category, personal finance and investor, that's another category. But I could probably name you 30 other categories. I mean, an interesting one I was looking the other day is Notion creators, right? That's a whole category. Notion creators have monetization opportunities as well. They can create templates. They could advise businesses. AI creators. I was talking to an AI creator yesterday who does workshops for even governments. So I think that the suite of products, we're at day 1. So if you're thinking about it from an entrepreneur perspective, my advice would be start with a specific category. Like at NAS.io, we have like 5 categories that we care a lot about. I'll give you an example. I mentioned developers. We think that software developers should have 10 different ways to monetize. It shouldn't just be being an engineer at a company. Right? They have so much knowledge. They could be thought leaders. They could be educators. They could run events and meetups, hackathons. In the US, I met a community there, a product design community. She came to Singapore. She said that Figma pays her like thousands of dollars to run hackathons to learn how to design the product, as an example. That's really cool, right? So that's developers, just developers. So pick 1 or 2 categories and look at ways that they could actually build products, and I think you'll be surprised. Just so you know, Patreon, who makes about $2 billion of GMV, they started with podcasters only. That was their focus, and they found that was very effective. So I hope that helps. Okay, I think there was one more question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi Alex, I'm Suryanshu.
Hi.
I've built a startup of myself, and I'm also building a community of all entrepreneurs, growing entrepreneurs. So we have around 300, 400 entrepreneurs from around the country. So what the big problem which we all face while building it? So there are budding entrepreneurs who are just starting, and there are people who have already reached a level. So sometimes it becomes very difficult for those entrepreneurs who have already reached a level to be in a part of community and help who are trying to grow. So they feel it's an additional task for them rather than doing it for the community.
Okay,
So any
interesting.
suggestions like how can we involve such people who have already grown so that they can be of some support for people who are trying to grow?
Okay, and just for those people who have already grown, why do you want them still in your community? What do you think is the benefit for you and others?
Yeah. So suppose someone who is building, suppose in a food tech, someone is growing, and someone who's already reached a level. So already they know what can be the challenges. Suppose they are looking for any investors who are particularly focusing on this particular field of investing only in food startups or e-commerce startups. So obviously, for new budding entrepreneurs, it would be difficult to shortlist which angel investor, which HNI, or
Got it. So you think they'll provide a lot of value to the others,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
I get it. No, that's a very good question. So look, I think that going back to providing the value to the individuals, what we have to ask ourselves is, for those people who've got to that level, what value can we provide them as a community owner? Maybe what I can provide them is some sort of prestige. Maybe I can provide them a platform for themselves, right? To be able to get more distribution. They're probably not going to get as much learning anymore because they've already hit that level. So I would recommend against just giving them the same role. Just not like, if you beg them to stay in the community, they're doing you a favor, but you're not providing them value. So what are some of the ways you can do? What are some of the things you can do? You can create a whole elevated level within your community. community masters, community advisors. They could even be part of your executive team. They could become honorary members. You know, just like when you graduate from a college, right? People still stay involved. There could be a tier where they get some form of, we make content about them, for example, or you put them on a platform. These are all things that they're like, hey, maybe they even graduate from your community. I think one of the things that when we've built communities of content creators, what we found is that there's a certain point where they get too advanced. So what we said was that actually, it's okay to leave the community. In fact, you can do it in a way which is like, it's a success. Hey, I've crossed 10,000 followers. I've now graduated from the community. You should all aim to graduate. That's the purpose of the community. So I think in this case, it may be okay. I've got advanced, I graduate, I get some benefits, right, from being an honorary member of the community. I don't need to stay engaged, but then in return for us giving you some sort of elevation, would you mentor some of the members? Get something in return, do some sort of exchange. That, I think, would also be a motivation for your new users, which are what's going to make the community grow. The person who sees that, wow, there was someone in the community who's now an experienced founder, right? And they appreciated the support they got in this environment. You can do that too. That social proof will be incredibly powerful. So don't be scared. If they're doing well, that's great. You can show that as a case study, keep them involved in some capacity, provide them with some value, but then use that as your social proof to acquire your next 300, 400, 500 members. I hope that helps. Great.